At the family dinner, I mentioned one childhood memory, and my mom dropped her teacup like it exploded in her hand. It happened so fast, but the silence that followed stretched like a rubber band about to snap. 1 second we were all at the table, full plates and idle chatter, and the next, her hand jerked. The cup hit the edge of her saucer, and tea splashed like a crime scene across the cream tablecloth. I remember her gasp, sharp and small, the way someone might react to a spider on their skin. Then the porcelain clinked against the hardwood floor, pieces scattering like teeth knocked out in a bar fight. I blinked. My uncle stopped chewing mid-bite. My cousin looked down like the ceiling might cave in. Only my dad moved, grabbing a napkin with the urgency of a surgeon and patting at the spill like it could undo what had just been said. All I said was this: "Remember that time I woke up in the middle of the night and you and Dad were arguing in the garage? I was maybe 7 or 8. You kept saying something about him showing up again. I thought I dreamt it until the smell of oil brought it all back." That was it. That was the trigger. The match dropped into gasoline neither of us knew had pooled all these years. She didn't look at me when it happened, didn't say a word, just stared at the shattered pieces like they were proof of something she'd buried. "Well, that was a long time ago," my dad muttered, voice low and tight. "We don't need to dig up ancient history tonight." But it was too late. I wasn't trying to start anything. I swear. It was one of those casual memories you toss out when everyone's full and the wine's flowing. It had been bugging me for years, though, a sharp edge in an otherwise blurry childhood. The garage, the voices, the smell of something burning, and that name. I couldn't remember the name, just the way she said it, like spitting out glass. Something in it had stuck, something mean and final. And my dad's voice, louder than I'd ever heard it before or since. The room had grown cold. The AC hadn't kicked in, but the air felt brittle, sharp around the edges. My sister tried to laugh it off. "Wow, okay, someone's been reading mystery novels again. Ryan, you always had the most vivid imagination." But no one laughed, because they knew, or at least suspected. Mom stood up without a word. Her chair scraped against the wood with a screech that sliced through the quiet. She left the pieces where they were and walked out of the room, slow and deliberate, like she was moving through water. Dad cleared his throat. "She's tired. Let's just enjoy the evening." But that was the moment. The exact second I realized something had been rotting beneath the surface of our family for years. And I just cracked open the lid. I should have stopped. Should have let it die the way they wanted. But something in me had started ticking like a bomb. I needed to know. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, I found myself in the garage. It hadn't changed much. Same workbench. Same cabinet doors with rusty hinges. Same faint smell of motor oil and dust. I stood there, trying to reconstruct that night in my head. The voices. The name. The sound of a fist slamming down on metal. That's when I noticed the floor panel. Slightly raised. A part of the concrete that didn't quite match the rest. I crouched down, ran my fingers along the edge. It wasn't a panel exactly. More like a storage hatch, cleverly hidden but imperfect. Someone had poured concrete over it years ago, but the color had faded unevenly. A subtle border. If you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it. I pressed my thumb against one corner. It didn't budge. Then I heard the door creak behind me. "You shouldn't be in here." My father's voice. Calm, but with that buried tension, like a string pulled too tight. I turned slowly. Who was she talking about? The night you fought? Who showed up again? He didn't answer. Just stared at me. Not angry. Not defensive. Just tired. "You were never supposed to remember that," he said. "We did everything to keep it from you." "Why?" I asked. "What was under here?" He sighed, rubbed a hand over his face. For a long moment, I thought he might walk away. Instead, he sat down on the bench, leaned forward, and said, "It wasn't what you think. But it was bad enough. And if you're going to keep digging, you need to hear the truth from me first." The way he said it, not angry, not bitter, made my stomach twist. Because people don't say things like that unless there's something unforgivable just beneath the surface. And I suddenly wasn't sure I wanted to hear it. But the door was open now, and whatever truth he was about to hand me, it was too late to turn back. He sat there, staring at the ground like the truth was written somewhere in the oil-stained concrete. I waited, heart pounding, not because I was afraid of what he might say, but because I already knew, somewhere deep in the marrow of me, that once it left his mouth, it would change everything. "His name was Caleb," Dad said finally. The name didn't ring a bell. Not at first. He used to come around when you were little. Never for long. Never with notice. Just showed up. I felt my arms fold on their own, a defensive instinct I didn't even register. He wasn't family, Dad went on. Not technically, but he was connected to us. To your mom, mostly. They had a history. There was a tone in his voice I hadn't heard before. Not quite resentment, but close. More like old pain that had calcified into something solid. You mean like an ex? I asked. Dad let out a short, bitter laugh. That would be easier, wouldn't it? No, not an ex. Not in the usual sense. He was more like a mistake that kept resurfacing. Something flickered in my memory. A shadow in a photo. A man standing by the fence at my 6th birthday party, half cut off by the edge of the frame. Sunglasses. A baseball cap pulled low. I never asked who he was. He was dangerous, Dad said. Not in the gun-waving, mafia-type way. Worse. He knew things about us. About your mom. And he used them. I leaned back against the cold metal shelf, letting that settle. Why didn't you ever tell me? He looked at me then. Really looked. Because we wanted you to grow up clean. Untouched by that side of the past. We thought if we never said his name, he couldn't leave a mark. I didn't know what to do with that. I felt like I was peeling away a scab that had never properly healed. So what happened that night in the garage? Dad's jaw tightened. He glanced at the floor panel. He came back, he said. After almost 10 years of silence. He showed up, same as always. No warning. Just strolled in like nothing. Your mom lost it. Why? Because he threatened to take you. The words didn't compute at first. I heard them, understood them, but they landed like foreign currency in my hands. Not usable, not real. Take me? Like kidnap me? Dad nodded slowly. He said he had rights. That he could prove something. He had documents, photos, claims we couldn't disprove fast enough. He said he'd expose everything if we didn't let him take you. Expose what? Dad stood up now, pacing, rubbing the back of his neck. That's not my story to tell, he said. It's your mother's. But what you need to know is this. You were never in danger because I made sure of it. That night, I gave him money, told him if he ever came back, I'd bury him where no one would find the bones. I swallowed hard. And the floor panel? Dad froze. That, he said, was where we kept the insurance. Cash. Papers. Things to protect you. Just in case. I knelt, suddenly needing to see it, to feel the truth under my hands. The edges were rough. Whoever covered it had done it in a rush. A cover-up, not a remodel. Is any of it still there? No. We emptied it when you turned 18. Burned what we couldn't store. It was over. Or so we thought. I looked up at him. So what now? Dad sighed. Now, you go talk to your mother. She's the only one who can tell you the rest. I nodded, slowly. I felt like I'd just inherited a memory that wasn't mine. Ryan, my dad said as I turned to leave. I paused. He wasn't your uncle. He wasn't a family friend. But he was something. What was he? Dad's face didn't change. He was your mother's brother. And he thought you were his son. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I walked out of the garage into the night, the air heavy with something old and unfinished. And I knew exactly where I had to go next. I found her in the kitchen, standing at the sink, her back to me, staring out the window like something out there might rescue her from this moment. The house was quiet again. Too quiet. She didn't turn when I stepped in. Just kept scrubbing the same glass. Already clean, fingers red from the hot water, her knuckles trembling. Mom. She flinched, barely, but didn't respond. Just set the glass aside like it was made of ash. I talked to Dad, I said. He told me about Caleb. Her shoulders tightened. Not dramatically. Not like a movie. Just a subtle shift, like her spine was bracing itself for impact. He said he thought I was Caleb's son. Silence. Her hands dropped to the counter. Is it true? She turned slowly, finally. Her face was pale, eyes glossy, not from tears, but from something deeper, like her body was still deciding whether to fight or surrender. No, she said softly. He wasn't your father. But he wanted to be. In every twisted sense of the word. The room felt too small. Explain, I said. She leaned against the counter like she couldn't stand on her own anymore. Took a long breath, the kind you take before diving into something cold. He was my half-brother, she began. Same mother, different fathers. He was older. By the time I was 10, he was already dangerous. My mother wouldn't see it. Called it acting out. Boys will be boys. My stomach twisted. When I was 12, he started saying things. Doing things. Things I didn't understand then, but knew weren't right. I told her once. Just once. Her voice cracked, but she didn't cry. She slapped me. Told me to stop making up lies about family. I felt like the floor was shifting beneath me. When I met your dad, I thought I'd escaped it. Moved states. Changed my name. Started over. He was good to me. Steady. Safe. But then, when you were 5, Caleb showed up. Said he'd found me. Said he wanted to reconnect. She let out a hollow laugh. Reconnecting, for him, meant threats. Manipulation. He said if I didn't let him be around, he'd tell everyone I had a child by him. That you were his. My pulse spiked. That night you overheard us in the garage, he'd come back again. Claimed he had papers. A birth certificate he'd forged. Pictures he'd doctored. He wanted custody. Not because he cared. Because he wanted control. Over me. Over you. She stepped closer, tears finally breaching. But he wasn't your father. I swear to you, Ryan, he wasn't. Your dad is your dad. The man who raised you. Who held your hand through every fever. Who fixed your bike at midnight because you had a school race the next day. I looked at her. I mean really looked. And I saw it. Not the woman who dropped a teacup earlier that night. Not the quiet, reserved mother who never raised her voice. I saw the teenager who'd been disbelieved. The woman who'd lived with that weight and tried to build a life in spite of it. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Because I wanted to protect you from what I couldn't protect myself from. I wanted to give you a clean slate. And I thought if I never said his name again, I could make him disappear. I nodded slowly. I didn't know how to feel. My thoughts were tangled wires. What happened to him? Her eyes met mine. Cold. Final. He disappeared. That one sentence sat like ice in my chest. What do you mean? She looked down. After that night, your father told him if he ever came back, he wouldn't leave the garage. Caleb never returned. A few years later, we heard through someone he'd been arrested in another state. Assault. Then nothing. No trace. Like he was a bad dream we finally woke up from. We stood in silence. Nothing left to say. Just the sound of the kitchen clock ticking like a slow drip. Finally, I spoke. I remembered his voice. Not clearly, but there was something familiar in it. I didn't realize it until just now. She nodded. Trauma does that. Stores things in the back room of your mind. Until you're ready. I looked at her, trying to find my footing. So why the lie? Why not just tell the truth when I got older? Because I was ashamed, she said. I thought if I told you, you'd see me differently. And I couldn't bear that. Something in me softened. Maybe it was the rawness in her voice. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, not as a mother demanding forgiveness, but as a woman terrified she'd just lost her son. I stepped forward, put my arms around her. She crumpled, quietly, into my shoulder. No sobs, just a release that had waited 25 years. We stood like that for a long time, past the ticking clock, past the hum of the refrigerator, past all the questions I still had. Because for now, this was enough. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. You can kill a story. You can bury a name. But secrets that heavy never stay underground forever. And I hadn't even looked through Dad's safe yet. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Couldn't sleep. My body felt wired, like it knew something was waiting to be found. I slipped past the guest room where my parents were still asleep, probably still drained from the night before, and made my way back into the garage. The concrete was cool under my feet. The silence even cooler. Dad's old safe sat in the corner behind the tool chest. I remembered when he brought it home, back when I was 12. Said it was for important stuff. I assumed that meant tax papers or birth certificates. I never thought it could hold something heavier. It was one of those old combination safes, the kind with the big spinning dial and a handle that clicked like a gun chamber. I didn't know the code, but something told me I wouldn't need to. On top of the safe was a yellow sticky note, barely clinging to the metal. For when you're ready. December 28th, 34. I stared at it for a long time. Dad must have left it after we spoke. Maybe he knew I'd come looking. Maybe part of him wanted me to. I turned the dial slowly. 28, 12, 34. The lock clicked. Inside wasn't much. A black folder, thick with documents. A small wooden box, locked. A flash drive taped to the lid. And at the very bottom, a worn envelope with my name on it. I grabbed the folder first. Opened it on the workbench. Inside were photos, grainy, old, of Caleb. Mugshots. Surveillance stills. One showed him outside our house, another at my elementary school. A report dated back to 1999, issued by a private investigator. Dad must have hired him. There were letters too. Threats from Caleb, handwritten, in jagged cursive, on torn notebook paper. One said, "I'll get what's mine. She can't hide you forever." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. Then came court documents. Protective orders. Cease and desist filings. My mom's signature on some, my dad's on others. They tried to handle it legally, quietly. But the most gut-wrenching piece was a copy of a paternity test, dated years ago. My name, my dad's name. And the result. Probability of paternity, 9,997%. It was like a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding finally escaped. He was my father. He always had been, no matter what Caleb tried to claim. I reached for the envelope next. My name scrawled in Dad's handwriting, uneven, like his hand had trembled writing it. Inside was a letter. "Ryan, I'm sorry it came to this. I always hoped we could make it through without you ever having to know about him. Your mother has carried more than she should have for most of her life. I've tried to carry what I could for her. Some of it I kept from you not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to preserve what innocence you had left. But if you're reading this, it means I've either failed to keep that promise, or you've chosen to learn the truth anyway. I don't regret protecting you, but I do regret the silence. You have every right to be angry, to ask questions, to demand more. Just know this, you were always mine. From the first time I held you to every scraped knee, every math test, every heartbreak. I was your father, and I always will be. If there's more you want to know, the flash drive will help. But please, talk to your mother. Not just about what happened, about who she was before it did. Because she's more than her trauma. And you deserve to know her, too. Love you, son. Dad." I sat with that for a while. Didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just let it fill the space around me like smoke. Eventually, I peeled the flash drive off the lid and plugged it into my laptop. There were only 3 files. One was a video. Old, low-res, time-stamped from a grainy home security feed. It showed Caleb pacing outside our front door. He looked thin, wild, muttering to himself. He rang the bell 5 times before walking away. The second was a scanned letter from Caleb to my mom, dated the week before that garage fight. It was unhinged, rambling about bloodlines, about how we were meant to be a family. It ended with, "You can't pretend forever. One day he'll come looking for the truth." The last file was a voicemail recording. From Caleb. His voice. He said my name. Said he knew I'd come find him someday. And if I ever wanted to know the whole truth, I'd need to listen to his side, not just theirs. I sat back. So Caleb had recorded this, expecting this moment, planning for it. Like some part of him knew he'd always haunt the edges of my life. But it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about what he knew, what he might still be hiding. I didn't want to hear it, but I pressed play anyway. The audio started with a hiss, like an old cassette tape coming to life. Then his voice. "Ryan, if you're hearing this, I guess that means the old man finally cracked open his vault of lies. Or maybe you did. Maybe curiosity got the better of you. Doesn't matter. What matters is, you don't know half of it." The voice was low, calculated. There was a strange familiarity to it that made my skin crawl. Not because I recognized it, but because I didn't. It felt like it should be familiar. And it wasn't. And that scared me more. "They painted me as a monster," Caleb said. "Sick. Dangerous. A threat. And maybe I am. But if I am, it didn't start with me." The silence between his words was heavy, deliberate, like he wanted each sentence to land with weight. "Your mother never told you the truth about what happened back then. She told you enough to make you afraid of me, I'm sure. Enough to make you hate me. But here's what she didn't say. She wasn't just my sister. She was my obsession." I stopped breathing. I think my heart did too. I know how that sounds. Believe me, I've lived with that sickness in my mind for decades. But you need to understand, it didn't start with me. It started with our mother. I paused the recording. Every instinct told me to delete the file, to pretend I never heard his voice. But my fingers betrayed me. I pressed play again. She was cruel. Our mother. Manipulative. Controlled everything. She pitted us against each other, then punished us when we got too close. She said we were disgusting, that we were broken, that we had the devil in us. But she created that. She made it so we were all we had. He was spiraling. You could hear it in his tone. "I loved your mother. Twisted, maybe. Wrong, definitely. But I loved her. And when she left, when she disappeared, she took my entire world with her. Then she replaced me with him. With your father. And with you. He spat my name like it burned. You think he saved her? No. He just gave her a better cage. One with silk sheets and quiet dinner parties. But she was still locked up. Still lying. Still hiding from the past. I clenched my jaw. You want to know the truth? I followed you, Ryan. For years. Watched you grow up. Watched the lies stack higher and higher. And I kept waiting. For the right moment. The moment you'd start asking questions. The room felt like it was shrinking. You were never mine. But I wanted you to be. I wanted some piece of her to still be mine. But your father took that from me too. Just like he took everything else. The tape clicked off. That was it. No confession. No final reveal. Just poison. Laid out in a neat, well-practiced monologue. I sat there in silence. Not moving. Not breathing. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream. To destroy something. But instead, I saved the file. Because somewhere inside that madness, there were pieces. Pieces that didn't belong to Caleb. Pieces that belonged to my mother. To her childhood. To the house she ran from. And if I wanted to understand her, truly understand her, I had to find out who raised them. I walked back into the kitchen. She was there. Same posture. Same silence. I slid the flash drive onto the table. She looked down. Saw the label. Her lips tightened. You listened? Yeah. All of it. She nodded slowly. Like she expected that. Like she had already made peace with it. He blamed your mother, I said. Said she made him what he was. She closed her eyes. She did, she whispered. I wasn't ready for that. He wasn't lying? Not about her. She reached across the table, took my hand in both of hers. Her grip was stronger than I expected. Ryan, there are things you will never fully understand. Because you shouldn't have to. That house, that life we escaped from, it was rot. And Caleb, he was both victim and monster. But don't confuse one with the other. I squeezed her hand. I'm not judging you. I need to know how it started. Her eyes glistened. Then I'll tell you. But not here. Where then? She looked past me, toward the hallway. We're going back. I didn't move. To the house? Yes, she said. To the beginning. For the first time in my life, my mother looked like she was ready to fight. And that terrified me more than anything Caleb ever said. We didn't speak on the drive. She sat in the passenger seat, hands clasped in her lap, staring out the window like she was memorizing the route in reverse. I watched the trees blur by, the sky dull and overcast, like even the sun didn't want to witness where we were headed. The town was 2 hours away, rural, forgotten, the kind of place that still had payphones and where everyone's mailbox was crooked. The last time she'd been here, I was in diapers. The last time she lived here, she was a prisoner in her own home. She gave directions quietly. Left at the old grain silo. Past the boarded-up church. When we turned down a narrow gravel road, she finally spoke. Her name was Evelyn, she said. My mother. Your grandmother. But she hated that title. Said it made her sound old. Made her sound weak. I didn't respond. I knew she wasn't talking to me. She was talking through me, to the version of herself that had never left. She had a rule for everything. How to sit. How to smile. What words were acceptable. What clothes weren't. And if you broke a rule, even one you didn't know existed, you paid for it. The house appeared like a wound through the trees. White paint peeling like sunburnt skin. Porch sagging like a snapped rib. Every window closed. Dark, like the house had forgotten how to let in light. It looked abandoned. And yet it pulsed with something ancient. Mean. I parked. We didn't get out right away. She stared at it like it might leap off its foundation and devour us. Then she opened the door and stepped out. I followed. The air was thick, still. Even the birds had gone quiet. She walked up the porch steps with careful steps, each one a memory she hadn't asked for. I saw her hesitate in front of the door, then reach under the broken flower pot. She pulled out a rusted key. Of course it was still there. The door creaked open like something out of a nightmare. The smell hit me first. Old dust. Mold. Faded perfume, and something darker beneath it all. Like pain had a scent, and this house had absorbed it into the walls. We stepped inside. Time had frozen here. The same crooked clock. The same yellowing wallpaper. The same photo frames, turned face down on every table like the house was trying to forget itself. She didn't say a word. Just walked through the living room, into the hall. Her fingers brushed the wall as she passed. Like she was checking to see if it was still real. At the end of the hall was a door. She paused. This was his room, she whispered. I knew she meant Caleb. The door groaned open. It was bare. Just a small bed, a broken dresser, a cracked mirror above a desk covered in dust. But on the wall, scratched into the plaster with something sharp, was a series of tally marks. Hundreds of them. She stared at them with hollow eyes. He used to count the days between punishments, she said. Said it helped him keep track of when the next one would come. I swallowed hard. From her? I asked. She nodded. He got it worse than I did. That's why I tried to protect him. That's why. I didn't see it coming when he turned it on me. She stepped into the room fully now, walked to the mirror, and touched its cracked edge. This is where he cornered me the first time. Said if I told anyone, he'd make it worse. And I believed him. Because that's what this house taught us. Survival meant silence. She turned to me, eyes shining. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Ryan. I know I failed you by not telling you earlier. I just wanted to show you why. I nodded. Words felt useless in that moment. She led me to the basement next. The steps groaned under our weight. Down there, it was colder, damper, but cleaner, like someone had tried to erase something. She flipped on a single bulb. In the center of the room was a small table. On it, a shoebox. A padlock, long rusted, lay beside it. This is what I came for, she said. She opened the box. Inside were photographs. Old, bent. A family of 4. A man I didn't recognize, tall, severe. My mother as a girl. Caleb, smaller, looking like he was trying to smile and couldn't remember how. Then there were letters. Dozens of them. From Evelyn to Caleb. Each one worse than the last. You were always the stronger one. Don't let her distract you. If anyone ever finds out, it's your word against hers. My blood ran cold. She encouraged it, I said. She nodded. She planted it. Nurtured it. Made him believe it was love. He was never taught the difference. She set the box down, looked around the basement. I wanted to burn this place down 1,000 times, she said. But I never had the courage. Until now. She pulled a matchbox from her pocket. Wait, I said, startled. She looked at me, calm. Focused. We're not burning it to hide something, Ryan. We're burning it to end something. A cycle. A sickness. I didn't stop her. Because maybe some places aren't meant to be preserved. Maybe some histories are only sacred once they're buried. She struck a match. And let it fall. The fire started small. Just one corner of the room. Flames licking the baseboard, teasing the edges of the shoebox before swallowing it whole. The letters curled like dead leaves, blackening at the corners, then vanishing into ash. We didn't run. We didn't panic. We stood there and watched it burn. The house groaned as the heat spread. Decades of rot and bitterness igniting like dry kindling. Smoke coiled up the basement stairs, thick and gray, smelling of wood and old sins. By the time we stepped outside, the fire had breached the windows. Glass cracked. Flames roared through the front room like a voice finally screaming after years of silence. We stood in the gravel driveway, watching it all go up. My mother didn't cry. She didn't smile either. Her face was blank, but her shoulders, they were lighter. As if part of the weight she'd carried since she was a child had finally burned away. I thought of Caleb. Of what he said in that recording. You can't pretend forever. He was right. She had pretended. Hid. Rewritten. But not to fool us. To protect us. And now, she was done pretending. The volunteer fire department showed up late. The house was already a lost cause. We told them it had been abandoned, which wasn't far from the truth. No one questioned us. Just another old farmhouse meeting its end. No one asked about the smell. Or the history. They didn't know that what burned wasn't just wood and wallpaper. It was a story. A sickness. A legacy. Back home, things didn't immediately get easier. That kind of pain doesn't leave quietly. But something shifted between us. A trust. A fragile kind of honesty that only comes after the worst has already been spoken. Dad hugged her longer than usual that night. Didn't ask questions. Just held her. Like he knew, somehow, that the burden she carried had changed shape. He gave me a look over her shoulder. One that said thank you. One that said I know. A few days later, I got a call. Blocked number. Static on the line. Then a voice. You think you buried it? Caleb, you think you can burn down a house and kill a story? You think that erases what happened? My throat tightened. I know everything, he said. You only know her version. I was about to hang up when he said it. There's a letter. One she never saw. One I left in that house. I froze. You missed it. Tucked behind the dresser in my room. I wonder what she'd think if she read it. If she saw what our mother really thought of her. Click. The line went dead. I stared at the screen. My pulse pounding. Was it real? Or just one final game? I hadn't looked behind the dresser. And now it was too late. For days, the call haunted me. I didn't tell Mom. I didn't want to reopen the wound. But something in me couldn't let it go. I drove back. To the ruins. What was left of the house was barely a skeleton. Charred beams. Blackened brick. The smell of ash still thick in the air. I stepped over debris. Into what had once been Caleb's room. The floor had collapsed in places. The walls scorched. But the dresser. It had survived. Half splintered. Blackened, but standing. I pulled it away from the wall. There, behind it, tucked into a crack in the paneling, was a piece of paper. Burned at the edges. Fragile as dried skin. I unfolded it with shaking hands. It was a letter. From Evelyn. To my mother. You think you're better than me. But you're just like him. Weak. Foolish. I saw the way you looked at him. Don't pretend you didn't want it. Don't pretend you're innocent. You brought this on yourself. I felt bile rise in my throat. This was the story Evelyn told. The one she planted in Caleb. The one she whispered into their ears like poison. It wasn't just cruelty. It was calculated erasure. A way to make my mother doubt her own memory. Her own reality. I put the letter in my pocket. Not to show her. Not yet. But because I needed to hold the truth. To remind myself of how deep the roots went. And how much still needed to be pulled. I sat on my bed that night. The letter spread out in front of me. Every line crawled under my skin. Don't pretend you didn't want it. It wasn't just a mother blaming her daughter. It was the root of all of it. Caleb's sickness. My mom's silence. The entire collapsing structure of a family that taught shame before love. And now, I held proof. Not speculation. Not whispered memories. But words. Intentional. Cursed into paper. I couldn't sleep. At 3 a.m., I poured a glass of water and found my mom in the kitchen. Awake. Wrapped in a sweater. Staring at nothing. Like she knew I was coming. I sat across from her and slid the letter across the table. She didn't reach for it. Just looked at it. I went back, I said quietly. I figured, she whispered. She finally picked it up. Her hands didn't shake. As her eyes moved across the page, I watched something happen. Not a breakdown. Not a collapse. More like recognition. Like someone finally hearing a song they'd tried to forget. She folded it once. Then again. Then set it down. She told me those words to my face once, she said. But seeing them written, that's different. I didn't speak. She told Caleb I wanted it. That I seduced him. That I was jealous he loved her more. I was 13. She said it flatly, like the fact had rusted into something solid. You don't have to explain, I said. Yes, I do, she replied. Because if I don't, then it just sits there between us. Festering. Like it did with her. Like it did with him. She took a deep breath. I spent my whole life trying to rewrite what happened in that house. I married a good man. I raised a kind son. I did everything I could to prove to myself I wasn't like her. That I wasn't broken. But no matter how much I cleaned the house, she was always in the walls. Her eyes met mine. I needed to burn it down, Ryan. Not to hide anything, but to take something back. I know, I said. She looked at the letter again. I want to tell the truth now. All of it. Even the ugly parts. Why? Because if I don't, Caleb wins. She wins. And you inherit something I never wanted you to carry. What truth? I asked. She exhaled slowly. I knew what he was becoming. Before he ever laid a hand on me. I saw the way he looked at me. I heard the things he whispered when no one else was around. But I said nothing. I was scared. I was ashamed. And for years, I thought maybe I'd asked for it. Maybe I'd caused it. Her voice cracked for the first time. And that lie, it lived in me, even when I knew better. I reached across the table and held her hand. That wasn't your fault. You were a kid. You were manipulated. You were gaslit your entire life. She squeezed my hand. I know that now, but I needed to say it. Out loud. To someone who mattered. We sat there a long time. Later, she asked if she could keep the letter. I said yes. She didn't burn it. She placed it in a new box, along with photos of us, her and Dad, me as a baby, one of all three of us at my college graduation. On top, she added a note. This is not my shame. This is my proof that I survived. We buried the box together in the backyard. Not to hide it, but to mark it. Like a headstone. And for the first time in my life, I felt like we had buried the right thing. Weeks passed. The weather warmed. The grass in the backyard grew over the place where we buried the box, but we both knew exactly where it was. We never talked about it again, but we didn't need to. Some things don't get closure. They just stop bleeding. One Saturday morning, Dad called me out to the garage. He was holding a dusty cardboard box. "I think it's time you had this." Inside were old home videos, VHS tapes, labeled in Mom's handwriting. Ryan's first steps, Christmas '98, Dad's terrible attempt at barbecue. "Thought you might want to digitize them," he said, "before they disappear." I smiled. "Thanks." That afternoon, I set up the old VCR in my apartment, plugged it into a converter, and started watching. Most of it was what you'd expect. Blurry footage. My toddler self waddling around in footy pajamas. Birthday cakes. Nerf gun battles. But then, on the fourth tape, there was something else. The angle was off. Like the camera had been set down without realizing it was still recording. The room was the old kitchen in our first house. I recognized the wallpaper. My parents were in the background, arguing in low voices. "I don't want him in this house again, Laura," Dad was saying. "I don't either," Mom whispered. "But if we push him too far, he'll go to the police. Or worse. He's bluffing. He always is." She looked scared. Her voice dropped. "What if he's not? What if he tells Ryan when he's older? What if he tries to spin it, make himself look like a victim?" My dad moved closer, speaking gently now. "We keep records. That's why I've been documenting everything. If it ever comes to it, we'll show him the truth." The camera angle shifted as someone picked it up. It was me. Tiny hands grabbing the side. A giggle. Then the footage cut out. I sat back. So even then, they were preparing. Not hiding. They were building a shield for me. Because they knew Caleb wouldn't stop. Not even from the grave. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I ended up outside. In the backyard. Standing over the patch of grass where the box was buried. And for the first time, I didn't feel haunted. I felt grounded. Because I knew who I was now. Not just Ryan. The kid who heard a strange name in a garage and pulled the thread. I was the son of a woman who survived the unthinkable. The son of a man who protected what he loved without fanfare. And I was someone who faced a truth most people would run from, and stayed standing. I started writing everything down. Not for revenge. Not for drama. But so the story wouldn't disappear. So if one day, I had a child of my own, and they ever found a letter, or a name, or a shadow in a photograph, they'd know the whole truth. And more importantly, they'd know that it ended with me. Because stories like this don't just fade. They linger. Unless you drag them into the light. Unless you name them. Unless you break the chain. And that's what this story is. Not a confession. Not a secret. A broken chain. A door finally closed. And locked behind me. It's been a year. Funny how time moves differently once a weight like that lifts. Like the clock starts ticking in real time again, not in slow motion grief. I still think about Caleb. Sometimes it's in the middle of the night. Sometimes it's when I see old family photos. Sometimes it's in the silence between my mom's words, when I hear the spaces where she's still rebuilding herself. But I don't hate him anymore. Not because he deserves forgiveness. Because I do. Hate is a chain, too. And I spend enough of my life holding it. My mom goes to therapy now. She started small, just a few sessions. But now she's the one recommending books to me. Telling me about things she remembered. Good things, too. Turns out, even in that house, there were moments. She found a photo of her and Caleb on a tire swing once. They couldn't have been more than 8. Both smiling. Real smiles. Before it all, she said. I asked if she wanted to keep the photo. She said yes. Not to remember him, but to remember her. Who she was before the world started trying to erase her. As for my dad, he never made a speech. Never asked for credit. But every now and then, he'd pass me in the hallway, clap a hand on my shoulder, and say, "You did good, kid." Like we were teammates. Like the war was over. And maybe, in a way it was. I got a new job. Started dating again. Life started filling back in. But one night, I came home to find a package on my doorstep. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Caleb, older, standing outside what looked like a diner. In another state. On the back, in tight, angry handwriting. "You didn't kill the story. You just skipped the last page." I stared at it for a long time. Not afraid. Just resolved. Because maybe he was still out there. Maybe he'd always be. But the difference now? He didn't own the story anymore. I did. And that last page? It's not his to write. It's mine. And this is where I end it. Not with fear. Not with revenge. But with truth. with a family that chose to heal instead of hide, with a door finally shut, with a son who became a man not by forgetting the past, but by facing it and choosing not to be defined by it. So if you're listening, if you've got your own ghost, if you've been carrying a name you never chose, a weight you didn't deserve, let this be your proof. It can end with you. And sometimes, survival isn't just about escaping the fire. Sometimes, it's about striking the match yourself and watching what should have burned a long time ago finally turn to ash